All right, coming to you from Algebra 1, we're going to be talking about zero product property. All right, so what I want us to think about right now, we have two little binomials. These are called binomials. When you have a binomial times a binomial, we don't even have to multiply these just yet. These basically reveal what we call zeros. So if you would please, in your journal, could you set up negative 4x minus 3 and set it equal to 0, just like that. And for the blue binomial over here, could you put x minus 3 equals 0, just like that? Just write it in your journal. Set them equal to 0. All right. Now, which one of these do you guys feel would be the easiest one? The orange or the blue? The blue, totally, right? You could even look at it and go, well, I know what that number is. That's a what? 3. X would have to be a 3. Now, if you were to solve this, what would you do to both sides? You would add 3 to this side, and you would add 3 to this side, and you would get x equals 3. So that would be one of my zeros. The slightly more difficult one is this one. It's not bad. All right. What would I add to both sides on this one? Add a 3. Add a 3. So what happens when you add a 3? You get negative 4x equals a positive 3. And what will be the last thing I do? Divide both sides by negative 4. And what do you get? X equals negative 3/4. Just like that. So what does that mean? That means if I were to plug in a negative 3/4 right there, or if I were to plug in a 3 right there, what would this whole equation equal? It would equal a 0. It's called the zero product property. So those are the two numbers. Those are what we call the roots, the solutions, the zeros, or the x-intercepts of this function. All right? So this form right here, guys, this is called factored form. So this form right here, if you put in your journal, this is called factored form. That's what it's called. All right? Now I'm going to type these two answers in, and we'll do another problem. All right? We'll do a couple so you guys see how it works. All right, so what was one? Oh, by the way, do you see where it says lesser? That means right here, which of these is the least? Yeah, the negative 3/4. Now, if you were to write this as a solution set, you would write negative 3/4, comma, 3. This is how you would write it as a solution set. So I want you to understand what solution set brackets look like. These are solution set brackets. This one's prettier than this one, okay? But there's the least, there's the greatest. So I'm going to go and type those in. Negative 3 divided by 4. That's the lesser, and the greater was 3. Okay, let's do one more right here, okay? Now this one is not in function notation, it just has it set equal to 0. So I'm going to make it a little bit bigger here, okay? We've got x plus 1 and 3x plus 4 equals 0. So go ahead and set that equal to 0. Once again, I'm going to write what factored form is, so you have factored form in your journal. A lot of times factored form, here's what you'll see. You'll see x minus m and x minus n equals 0. Now, in factored form, just so you know, the solution set would be m comma n. Those would be the solutions. So this is what factored form looks like. So we have factored form right here. I'm going to highlight them in two different colors. Let's go blue and let's go green. Blue and green. So as you guys are writing this down, you should some of them you're like, I already know what to do on one of them. That's like, I already know what answer. What number would you have to plug in here to make it equal to 0 without having to do any solving? Negative 1, right? Why would that be a negative 1? Because negative 1 plus 1 is 0. So you don't necessarily have to set up that equation, but go and set up this equation. So what would I do to set this guy up? I'd say 3x plus 4 equals 0. All right? 3x plus 4 equals 0. I'll give you a chance to write that down. So in order to get this guy equal to 0, I have to do what? I got to take away a 4 from this side and take away a 4 from this side. So what does that leave me with on the left-hand side of the equal sign? Just a 3x. Remember, that's 0, right? And what's over here? Negative 4. And then what do? Divide both sides by 3. Now, let me explain something. If you were to do this in a calculator, and you do negative 4 divided by 3, it's going to give you this approximate number, negative 1.33, and it just keeps going on forever. You cannot type that into the Khan Academy because that's what's called a repeating decimal. You can't do repeating decimals, so you have to type this in, okay? Now, when we think about the number line, which one of these is smaller? Is negative 1 or is negative 4 over 3? Which one's the bigger one and which one's the smaller one? That's what you got to be careful of. So think of the number line. Ready? Think of the number line. I'm going to set up the number line. All right, so here we go. We got a number line. Right here we have 0. Right here we have negative 1. Right here we have negative 2, right? So negative 1, would you agree, goes right about there? Well, where would negative 1 1/3 go? Just slightly over to the left just a bit. So that kind of lets you guys know this is the lesser, right? That's the less and that's the greater. So you got to be careful when you guys are typing these in. You got to make sure you type them in the correct order, okay? We go from least to greatest, least to greatest. So I'm going to type in, here's my solution set, guys. Negative 4/3, comma, negative 1. Negative 4/3, negative 1. Okay? So write that down in your journal. We'll type it in. No. Now listen. A student was asking me, don't type the decimal in. I'm like, no, don't type it in. Now listen. We could have typed in the decimal in right. Where is it? Oh, right here. Because negative 3/4 is negative 0.75, and that would have been okay. We just can't type in a decimal that's repeating. You can't type those in. Okay. All right, this is the last one we're going to do on this video. What I'd like you to do is carefully write that one down in your journal. All right, and then we're going to also show you guys how to use Desmos. So this is going to be the last thing we're going to do, show you how to do it by hand, because I want to make sure you know how to do it by hand, and then make sure you guys know how to interpret stuff in Desmos. Here we go. We have g of x equals negative 5x minus 1, 2x plus 8, just like that. Now we're going to highlight this one in green. All right, and we're going to highlight this one in kind of a lavender color. All right, so go and write those down. All right, so this one we're going to do a little shortcut. Okay, so here's the shortcut that I want you guys to have. So for example, if I have g of x equaled, I'm just going to put ax plus b times, I'm going to put cx plus d. So if we had a function, a quadratic, where you had an a value, you had a c, it looks like this. I want to show you guys how to find your solutions. Okay. So one of my solutions, and I'll even highlight these in orange and lavender, just like the ones up above here. Not orange, sorry, green. Green and lavender. In this one, in the green one, x would equal the negative b value over the a value. On this one, if I wanted to find this one, it would be the negative d value over the c value. And that's what I do in my head a lot of times. And this might not make a whole lot of sense with this little formula that I made out of this, but hopefully it'll make sense if I just show you, okay? So right here, look at the green. What is the negative version of that number? What's the negative version of that number? Now, what's the opposite of a negative one? Yeah, so 1 over negative 5. So it's the opposite version of this number divided by this number. Okay? All right? So, right now, let's think about this. If I were to plug in this negative 1/5, all right? If I were to plug in that negative 1/5, what's a negative times a negative? A positive. And you would get 1, and 1 minus 1 is 0. So that would work. So how about this? How about this one right here? What's the negative version of this number? Negative 8 over 2. What's negative 8 over 2 equal to? Negative 4. Well, if I were to plug in a negative 4 right there, what's 2 times negative 4? Negative 8. And what's negative 8 plus 8 equal to? 0. All right? So what I do when I look at these, I'm just like, it's the negative version of this over this. It's the negative version of this over this. And I just do that when I'm having to do it in my head. Okay? So what would be the lesser? The lesser would be the negative 4, and the greater one would be a negative 1/5. Now, some students are like, I don't like this. I will never be able to do that. So what could you still technically do if you wanted? Could you take the negative 5x minus 1 and set it equal to 0? Sure. Could you still take 2x plus 8 and set it equal to 0 and solve for it? Absolutely. So this right here, this will always work. So I could still add 1 to both sides. You get negative 5x. Divide both sides by negative 5, and you still get what? Negative 1/5. Over here, what could you still do? Subtract 8 from both sides. Get 2x equals negative 8. Divide both sides by 2, and x would still equal a negative 4. So you'll still get the same answers, just a faster way to do it. So right now we've shown you the long way and the shortcut, but there's only one more way to show you, and that's the Desmos way. And some days, like when you're taking a college test or whatever, entrance test, you won't be allowed to use Desmos, but when you're a freshman, you are allowed to use Desmos. So check this out. Could you guys type this in exactly as it appears into Desmos? Just type it in exactly as it appears into Desmos with me. Okay? So here we go. Go to Desmos. I'm even going to use function notation. So I'm going to go. Where's my ABC here? Oh, I gotta type over on my computer. All right. So here we go. G of x equals, and we had parentheses. What was it? Negative 5x minus 1. And then what else? Was it 2x plus 8? Like that? What does Desmos always reveal every single time in whatever form? Reveals your two zeros every single time. Okay? Now this is where students have to be careful. What was the previous one where we had a, let's say we had a repeating decimal. I'm going to make this into a repeating decimal. So what if we had, say, 3x plus 4, and we had an easy one like x minus 1? Which one could you type into the Khan Academy, and which one would you have to change into a fraction? That one, could you type that in that way? No. All right? So you'd actually have to make it into a what? Negative 4 divided by 3. You have to type it in that way. All right? So I'm going to go back over to the Khan Academy right here. What was our lesser? What was the least one over there? What did we say it was equal to? I believe it was negative 4. And then our greater was, I believe, negative 1 divided by 5 is what we had. All right. So guys, that's the zero product property. Go ahead and work on that, and good luck.